Good morning and welcome to Turnip Innovation Festival 2022. This is the second edition of Turnip Innovation Festival, and the theme for the conference this year is intellectual property and climate change. Climate change mitigation is an area where innovators have the opportunity to develop technologies that solve large scale local and global issues. We believe big businesses can be built upon climate innovation, and hence intellectual property will play a vital role in promoting sustainable economic growth. Uh, and that is why we've put together this event for you to inspire innovation and entrepreneurship related to climate action. I want to thank our sponsors, Arctic Innovation Consulting, Climfort, and DPIIT IPR Chair Andhra University, who have made possible this massive event free of charge. I want to thank you for taking time for attending, and I hope you'll have a great day ahead. You can find the event schedule and the links to all the talks in the links in the description. And without further ado, we'll start with our first keynote talk by Dr. Hemang Shah, who is the Director of Engineering at Qualcomm Innovation Labs. Dr. Shah, he is an innovation IP technology transfer evangelist. He frequently engages with startups, industry, academia to design products and create disruptions in the startup ecosystem. So I welcome Dr. Hemang Shah. Sir, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Congratulations to you and the Turnip team for the second year of the Turnip Innovation Fest. Very excited to be here. I got started with design thinking even before I knew what that term was. About 10, 12 years ago, I met a group of people who were brainstorming, and the idea was, hey, together we all are experts in different domains. Like I used to be from the domain of display engineering, and I had friends who were someone was a software expert, someone was a communications expert, and together what we would do is every 2 weeks we'd meet for lunch, and we'd all bring our own lunch boxes, but along with sharing our food, we said, why don't we share a problem to solve? And because each of us came from different backgrounds, we'd all attack that with our perspectives. And then the solutions got more and more intense, which led to a good number of patent filing. And later on, I stumbled across this formal framework, which is called as design thinking. And it's a beautiful framework, which I believe can apply to any problem that you want to solve in the world. I've used it to solve high-tech problems. I've used it to solve for my career planning. So it scales remarkably well. And I'm excited to share it with all of you here today. My only request is that you keep this interactive. So please type in the chat box, and we'll get to see it. And if possible, I'll try to address it on the spot. But if not, we'll make sure that there's plenty of time for Q&A. So let's dive into the world of design thinking. Now, design thinking is a framework which has been pioneered by a very well-known firm called as IDEO. And you should check out their website. And on their website, they've shared a number of case studies. So you can use it for a variety of things, such as a banking problem. I really like this problem called as a liter of light. In a number of poor communities, people are living very close together. They live in, let's say, roofs which are made of aluminum. Getting natural light over there is a huge challenge. And so what this liter of light framework did is that they created, we have these 1.5 liter bottles, those big liters of soft drink that we all empty and use it for different things. So they put water, some algae, and bleach in it. So bleach and water is a remarkable combination because that helps you scatter light. And the algae in there is just to prevent mold and fungus from developing. All they do is they cut a hole in the roof and they stick that bottle. You can see it's only about 3/4 of its way in the room, and the other part is out in the open air. And when it's out in the open air, it takes the sunlight, it scatters across the room. And the light which you get is around, let's say, a 50 to 60 watt bulb. And what did you pay for it? Really nothing, because we know what these bottles cost. Water is cheap and bleach is again very cheap. So this started, I believe, in Brazil, and then it spread to other parts of the world. You can even use design thinking to solve a high-tech problem, such as in the banking industry. So the scale at which you can apply it is something which appealed to me. Now, what is design thinking? It's a five-stage process, and here I'm showing you a design thinking framework from the Stanford D School. So Stanford has a design school, and they have very helpful resources. And I can see that a number of you are from universities, so please take a look at that. One more time, mic check. Is that better?
It's perfect.
Sincere apologies for
Yeah.
everyone. There is Murphy's law, which sometimes applies, and Murphy's law does not mean things will go wrong. I think it means what can go wrong will go wrong. And unfortunately, I was not fully prepared for all those possibilities. And that's why we had this issue yesterday. Uh, I think to recap, design thinking has five stages. The first stage is empathize, which requires you to understand the user's experience. You have to understand what they are doing things, why they are doing, their physical and emotional needs. Like when my PC crashed, you should have heard me expressing both physically and emotionally in the backstage. Uh, you'll understand what's meaningful to them, right? And the way to do it is you observe them, you engage them in conversations, you try to get as much qualitative information as possible. The next stage is definition. So in empathize, what you did is you created a volume of observations, right? You collected as much information as possible. And now we're trying to define it to a meaningful but actionable problem statement. This actionable is the key part. And how can you be sure that it is actionable? Firstly, you have to infer patterns from the user study. You can't just say that, hey, I assume that the user is facing this problem. From the data you've collected, you validate your assumptions and you draft a need statement. And we'll cover what that is later on. Okay. And what you're essentially doing here is from the volume of information that you've collected, you're moving to a narrow, but it's going to be a more qualitative problem space for you to address. The next stage in design thinking is ideation. Ideation simply means you're generating n number of solutions, as many solutions as possible. And how do you do that? You combine your understanding of the problem with your imagination. So you have the problem statement on one side, and your imagination can be as wide as possible. So you're not looking to generate one nice path. You're trying to generate a messy, as many solutions as possible. Right? Look at all these post-it notes. They have one idea per note. And so you're collecting literally a forest of ideas. And the best way to do that is to brainstorm with a diverse group. Because a diverse group, everyone will come with their own perspectives. Everyone is an expert in their own domain. Our minds all work differently, right? So each one of us will be more comfortable sharing solutions that appeal to us. It's very, very important that you encourage wild ideas. This is not the stage where you say, hey, here is something which is realistic. We want something which is cost effective. Remove all those filters out. You want to encourage as crazy ideas as possible. Again, you're looking at a forest, and in a forest, you don't have just trees of one kind, right? You have all kinds of shrubs, you have all kinds of plants, various animals. Just whatever is possible, collect as much as you can. And it's very important to defer judgment. See, all these reality shows make us feel like we are the judges, like we are the judge saab. This is not the time for it. There is a time and place for you to add filters, not at the ideation stage. So in the ideation stage, very simple. You're taking a problem and you're asking people, what are the n number of ways we can solve this problem? That's it. Now, after the ideation stage, after you've collected this forest of ideas, you want to create a path through that forest so that you can get to a proof of concept. And why should you have a proof of concept or a prototype? Because a prototype, as you create it, you're going to ideate and you're going to problem solve further. and you can't help it, but when anyone shows you something which they've made, even when my kids make something with Legos, it starts a conversation. We start like, hey, can you add this to it? Yeah, I don't think it'll work well in this condition. What will you do, uh, let's say, when a speed bump happens, right? So when you have a prototype, when you're physically holding it, you can't help but give feedback. Importantly, you want this prototype to be done in such a manner that if it fails fast and it fails cheap. Because there's nothing worse than a prototype which took a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of money to make, only to find out that it failed. I mean, think of all these wild concept cars that you've seen in trade shows. These really wild, wacky, futuristic cars that might appear 20, 30 years later. They all took a lot of time and money to make, but you've never seen them on the roads, right? So those prototype cars are not cheap and fast failures, right? So you want something which can be done, let's say, with cardboard boxes, with PowerPoint slides, something which is really easy for you to assemble. And mainly prototyping, if it's fast and cheap, you will test different possibilities. So I'll go to the example of Lego blocks, right? If anyone gives you Lego blocks, you will create maybe 10, 15 different things with the same set of bricks. And they did not take any additional money for you to make. All you did was you took your understanding of how you're going to solve that problem and you started creating things. So test as many possibilities as you can. And finally, you want to test, you want to get feedback. And how do you do this? Because firstly, you want to go to users who are going to be on your side. So you don't want to go to your harshest critic when you're giving them your prototype. You give it to someone who's a bit friendly, who's going to give you quality information. They are going to validate your point of view, right? That's going to be your primary objective. And if they are giving you feedback which is opposite of this thing, really strongly consider that, because that's going to inform you about your next iteration of prototypes. Because think of prototype as one experiment which you did, and let's say if it failed, you want to go back to the next one and the next one. And sometimes if you're thoroughly wrong, you may have to go back to the drawing board. So what this means is that after this testing phase, you probably went back to the empathizing phase. In reality, it's going to go from testing to possibly further ideation, that maybe you've exhausted all your prototypes and you didn't really solve that problem. Or you might go fine tune your prototype and test. So your journey in reality is going to be like a roller coaster. There's no one set path. There's no thing that, hey, after 2 cycles or 2 or 3 complete cycles, you have the winner. No, there's nothing like that. The most important part in the entire design thinking framework is you have to pick the right problem to solve. So if I go back 2 slides, okay, let's take a look again. Empathize, we went broad. Okay, we collected as much information as possible. And then from that, you narrowed down to a funnel and you said, here is one key problem I'm going to solve. And this key problem led to these few stages. Because this part, let's say, took some time, some amount of people dedicating their hours, their energies to collecting user feedback or user observations. But over here, you started involving larger teams. You started committing more resources. So in ideation, again, you went a bit broad, collecting as many ideas as possible. Then you prototype a couple of those, you tested, and then you kept on refining. But if you had picked a wrong problem to solve, that would set you to a very expensive path. So in this graph, I'm showing you the cost of errors. And on the x-axis, you have, let's say, time. So if you can fail over here, ideally we want that. You want as many failures here as possible. However, what happens is that if you pick the wrong problem to solve, you keep on committing resources and resources to it. And then when you fail, it's too late, it's too expensive. And that can sometimes mean company shutting down, that project being removed being counted as a failure. So it's always better if you can fail fast, fail in this region, because you can afford those number of errors. So at the definition stage, and especially when it comes to a large topic such as climate change, climate change sounds so serious. It's like, man, the entire world. I'm not just solving for myself or my home. I'm solving for the entire world, and it can it can be an overwhelming problem. So what should you consider at the definition stage? So at the definition stage, one way to pick a really high quality problem to solve is by drafting a need statement. And so in the need statement, what you're trying to do is understand the primary needs, which are the needs which are absolutely essential for that product or service, must have. For example, if I'm making a computer mouse, I wanted to have a right click and a left click. For me, that's an absolutely essential thing for it to have. Secondary needs which are good to have but not really required. So I really want my mouse to be ergonomic, so that or when I move it on any surface, whether it's my wooden table or sometimes I might be on a plastic table, it should move in a smooth manner. It's not a must have, but I'd really like it if it did that. And latent needs are needs which I'm not even expressing, but if you can solve for that, it would result in an unforgettable experience. So, for example, there was, I think a long time ago, our computer mouse used to just have left click and right click. And then someone added this scroll thing on top, right? This nice little wheel that if you move, it can scroll your pages. That is not what a computer mouse was designed to do. But we were not even expressing that, hey, we are spending time looking at web pages, looking at lengthy documents. If someone has a nice scroll feature, oh, once I experience that, every single mouse I want needs to have it. It became this really strong need that, when delivered upon, will keep me coming back to that solution. So when you're drafting a need statement, you bucketize all your observations about the users into, hey, according to the physical and emotional needs. Physical needs are mostly, I would say, primary needs. Some of them could be secondary, like the ergonomics and what the form factor is and so on. Emotional needs, where if you can understand the emotions that people are experiencing, I believe that leads to identification of latent needs. So if your observation skills are strong, I think you have a greater chance of hitting upon a latent need. And that's truly where a remarkable innovation can arise from. The next stage is after ideation, and this really applies to a tough, challenging problem. You have to imagine what the user behavior is going to be to adopt that solution. So, are you talking of the users, going for a large overhaul or incremental changes? So I interviewed someone on my podcast, uh, and this person was solving for food wastage. According to this company is called Plant Jammer. According to their study, uh, at home, we waste a lot of food. But how do you solve that? So most of our homes have a refrigerator, and a refrigerator has a large number of vegetables and other ingredients in them. But we don't cook a large variety of dishes. Like, unless you have a master chef living at home with you, we tend to cook maybe around 10 to 12 different recipes in a year. So what this company solution does is it understands the kind of recipes you're making. So if it knows that, hey, I am more of a khichdi type of person, or dal khichdi kind of a person, they're like, hey, you can mix and match these ingredients to get different variations according to the dishes I'm liking. And they learn all that. They make sure that I empty my fridge, by cooking dishes which I'm going to consume. So they are helping the environment, they're helping the climate. It's a huge problem that they're solving, but it requires an incremental change at my end. So there's that nice one small step that they're making me take, in order to solve a much larger problem for the world. Climate change support requires systematic changes. Sometimes, let's say if it's waste recycling, it requires segregation of waste, not just at the home level or the individual level, but even after that segregated waste is collected at repositories, what you do with that does require a larger body to take care of that. So really define what needs to happen outside for it to work. Are those systems already in place, or are you going to require for more regulatory governmental changes? And finally, what is it that you can deliver? Because we all want to solve problems that change the world, but can I really deliver something that the world can consume at scale? So am I better suited of making a problem or solving a problem which an individual can adopt at their end, or am I better off, let's say, as an institution or as a company, delivering on something which I can offer to a large body such as a state government or a central government? Really think meaningfully about these things before you go down the path of solving the problem. So I want to leave time aside for Q&A. Design thinking for climate change, of course, it's a very significant problem. I really encourage you to keep iterating until you hit the right one. Design your prototype so that you can get to an MVP, like a minimum viable product, really fast, really cheap, so that if it fails, you have the energy to go back and iterate for a few more, right? So again, this is going to be a loop, and loops are required to hit upon a solution that hits all the right notes. So thank you so much for your time, for your energy. I look forward to answering any questions if we have time. I apologize for the issues at my end, but hopefully we caught up. So in the chat box, so he says, how can as a parent use design thinking to help the child perform better? It's a brilliant question, Suhiji. Uh, Understand who is the problem you're solving for. Yeah, and I'm a parent too, and sometimes we confuse things. Am I solving for myself as a parent, meaning is it for my own expectations, or am I solving for the child? Right. So the right thing in most cases tends to be that we want to solve for the child. So understand things from their perspective. What are the things in which they have fun? So for example, performance, let's say it's academic performance, everyone learns in their own ways. Some people are visual learners, meaning they like to observe, learn through pictures, through videos. Some people are auditory learners, meaning they would prefer to hear from a teacher or a parent say those words out, although they might be in the textbook, but they prefer hearing those out. And some learners are kinesthetic, meaning they like to feel it. So really put yourself in the kid's shoes. uh, Observe them, when they are having fun. Where are they most engrossed? When do they lose track of time completely? So if they are, let's say, kinesthetic learners, such as people who have fun with Legos, they keep on building things, and you have to remind them, hey, it's time for lunch. Take a break now. So that's when they like to learn through experiments. Or they could be visual learners, like they are completely engrossed in books all the time. So track as many observations as you can, and then fit the so that's your empathy or observation bank. After that, whatever problem you're solving, if it's academic performance, you have the observation bank to figure out that, okay, I need to ideate around this particular problem. When you prototype, you pick the parts where your child is resonating. So is it through books and visual media, or is it through different voices, or is it through different experiments? But do try it at your end. It works at the individual level really well. I guess there's a question by Shelly John. Any ideas of design or model for social science students in uh, climate change? Shaliji, can you please expand a bit more? Okay. In the meantime, I'll take Pallavi Rani's question, which is how to know which is the right topic to work. Refer back to your data bank. Collect as many observations as you can. So I'll go back to my days of being a grad student, being a researcher, picking the right topic to address for my doctorate work. At that time, I spent a good 6 months doing literature search. And literature search did not just mean reading as many papers as possible. Someone had to give me a direction that, hey, we are going to solve a problem in the area of material science and optics. So I started reading problems over there. But what this person also did is, if you're starting from a blank slate, sometimes that can be the toughest to start ahead. So what my professor at that time, he gave me, I guess what I would call as a baby project, which is a project that he had working at his end. It was more of, hey, get your hands dirty while you're doing this literature search. So if you're not sure of, let's say, which climate change problem to address, as an example, try to read up as much as you can about what's happening around you. See where you can go to a particular facility or an institute where you can observe things firsthand. Because once you get your hands dirty, that along with your research gives you an amazing starting place. And so that will really aid your empathy stage, where you're trying to collect as much information as possible. From that, give it enough time, let's say 2 months or 3 months. You'll notice patterns, and from those patterns, there'll be a couple of problem statements that will really appeal to you. And that's when you kickstart the rest of the journey into the definition stage, ideation, and so on. Okay, so I guess Shelly John asked topics for economic students. So very similar to what I just explained, that you start with a general direction, which is climate change. You have a particular data bank, right? That how climate change is going to affect us, how it can affect economies, and you combine that with, let's say, what the natural expertise is there around you all. That let's say if it's around economics of of say people of a particular income, or a particular industry which is there around you, maybe you start with that. You collect as much observation about them. So let's say if there are manufacturing facilities around you, understand what is it that that those factories are working on. How are they contributing to climate change? What are their challenges? And then separately, you add information about what are the governments around the world saying, how should these industries change. So that will give you a really powerful data bank, because not only you have some theoretical or rather regulatory guidance, but you also have people around you where you can visit more in person. That gives you a very quality empathy data bank. And that again, from that point, dig in further to what's a meaningful problem to solve, that hopefully the manufacturing folks can adopt, that also helps our country's goals. Okay, I'm again going through the chat box. So thank you so much for these questions. Really appreciate all the feedback you're sharing. I'll be very happy to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. Also, you can find me over there. Just search for Dr. Hemang Shah and you'll see me there. A question is for big data: how to design the framework. So, Sri Sahasranaman ji, I think big data is more of a solution rather than a starting point. Uh, Big data, means a variety of techniques that you can use to address data sets which are very large. So, as an example, in Excel or Sheets, I can work with reasonably large data sets, but then there'll be such a data bank which is much larger than that, uh, and I may need special tools. So big data is more of a solution. So I would say it makes its entry in the prototyping phase of the design thinking framework. That is this, uh, 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 can this solve the problem that I've picked? So don't start with big data. I would say get to big data as a possible solution mechanism. Okay. Thank you, Shambhuji. Thank you, everyone, uh, for all the feedback. So, Purushottam ji, great to see you here. So here I'm on a personal hat, but on my work hat, I lead the startup incubation program for the corporation I work for. We are incubating startups. So these are companies which are registered. They can be from universities, but they have to be registered as companies. So we work with them. The other thing that we are doing is promoting IP education, IP awareness. So whenever we innovate as a country, I believe that the next stage that we have to take is to really respect intellectual property. That means we value the IP that we are creating. We have to register those. So there's an app called L2 Pro, which NLU Delhi, DPIIT have released. We provided our inputs based on working with startups. It's completely free to use. Do take that, because as universities, as academic institutions, we are looking at things not just which are that are of immediate, but those are problems which will be of relevance in the next 5 years, 10 years from now. That's an amazing hotbed of innovation activity. Do take that. There are fellowship programs which the corporation does. There are various university engagements. And to me, all of that starts with a passion for solving a meaningful problem, convert those into solutions, innovate around those, and three, file your IP. File for IP, because once you do that, that will set up your institute for further success. Like, I hope Dr. Purushottam can address how he has remarkably improved the tech transfer ecosystem in the country. As academic institutes, you should pay very close attention to what Dr. Purushottam has to share. So I'm going through the chat box again. I apologize that there are many, so really apologize if I miss anything. So I'm going to pick a question from Aditi Saha, which came early on. What kind of skill set does one need to have a head start in design thinking? I believe design thinking is one such framework where you do not need any skill set in particular. All you need is a passion to solve a problem. So if you're a curious person, if you're wondering about how do I go about solving a problem in any arena, I mean, just for the theme of this innovation fest is around climate change. We all consume information through different channels, be it newspaper, be it social media, friends and family. As long as we are curious about what's happening in that field, we are all collecting our own data banks. It's what we do from that determines the next course of actions. Most of us let that information sit in our heads. We use it for trivia information, but we don't take it to the next stage. And the next stage simply is, what is a key problem to solve? I think as long as we get to that stage, we'll we'll be able to find resources around it. And those resources could be that, let's say I'm not an expert in environmental regulations, but if I'm curious about a problem enough, these days it's so easy to find someone. If you don't have people living around you, on a platform like LinkedIn, you can find someone who's an expert in that domain, who's probably residing very close to where you are, and bring that person in, and together start that discussion going forward. So I think that's the beauty about design thinking, that if you're curious enough to solve anything, it opens up doors. So you don't need a skill set. All you need is a curiosity, and that's great enough. There's a question by Oliver Bright. Jeev, who's asking, in what way will design thinking help rural development? So, as an innovation framework, I design thinking is applicable to anything, including rural development. Where I think it fits in well is that it's a very low cost approach, right? All these stages do not require any particular software or a facility to work in. You can really apply it wherever you are using whatever tools, whatever languages you are comfortable with. So if there is a rural problem, again, look at and distill that down into what does a rural problem mean to you. What do you want to develop upon? Is it is it an infrastructure? Is it going to be like an education in a rural setting? Is it going to be a business framework? I think you start with one such area, and you start with the empathy stage where you're collecting as much data as possible. And again, rural is a very broad term. If we look at our cities, our or rather our towns and villages today, they are looking very different than 10 years ago. A number of them have become so much more advanced in terms of technology usage, in terms of their own awareness about things. So what we would assume are their challenges may not be true until and unless you spend enough time with them. So start with that. And again, if you solve for the entire village, it can be a difficult thing. But if you solve for a village around, let's say, sanitation, collect feedback around sanitation, look at what are the best practices, look at their physical needs, emotional needs, collect as many patterns as you can. And again, that once you have a good data bank, that will set an amazing foundation for you to build upon. So I'm very pleased that number of universities, academia folks are here. Uh, there's a side in me which wants always wants to be a professor, and I enjoy teaching. It's one of the paths in which I was headed to at once upon a time. Uh, so really happy that I got the opportunity to connect with you. So, in case I missed something, please connect with me after this on LinkedIn. I think they've shared the links. I do talk about innovation and how to apply different things at work. So, I have a small podcast on that. So, happy to connect with you after this event. I thank Rahul. I thank the entire Turnip team for having me here. And most importantly, thank you for all your time.
Thank you so much, Hemang sir, for such an informative session. Uh, I hope all the links are in the description, the sir's LinkedIn. You can connect with him there. And please join our next session. The link is in the description and also in the YouTube chat. Thank you, sir. I'm
Yep.
ending
Thank
the
you.
broadcast. Can I?
Sure.
Thank you so
See you
much,
all.
sir.
Bye.